Hey,
Hi.
Jenna! Yay, it worked! Woo!
It worked.
This is the part I was most stressed about, is can we
The
get on
moment.
together live?
I know,
Yay!
I
We have this
know.
moment, if nothing else, right? We made it.
Yes. Thank you so much for finding the time to talk.
Oh, are you kidding? You know what? Can I just say a few things before we get started? I
Sure.
just really, I love your book, and it's such a refreshing take on making peace with food, and at such a deeper level. You know, we need more and more books to help support all our folks and loved ones and friends going through all this diet culture suffering. It breaks my heart. And so I'm just thrilled to be able to chat with you about this. And why don't you tell everyone about why you wrote this book and what makes it so different than most books that have been out there, including our intuitive eating book?
Well, and
That's a loaded question.
I'm so appreciative of your generosity. You've always been so generous to me. And I think, like, I talk about in the book about how our natural tendency is to be of benefit to one another. And you embody that, you know, as a mentor and in all of your work, and in just the basic sense of your work in trusting people's own intelligence. Like, to me, I think that was an inspiration to me to view this topic through the lens of Buddhist philosophy. You know, to answer your question about why I wrote it, I was deeply inspired by your work with Elise. I don't know if I ever told you, but like, it's official. I've been a dietitian for 20 years now. And
woo, congratulations.
Thank you. But the first 15 years, I was on the research and writing side because I didn't like the paradigm of like the one-way communication that nutritionists often have with patients and clients. Like, I have the knowledge, I'm going to transfer it to you, without taking into account like that person's experience, that person's culture, that person's just moment to moment lived, you know, bodily presence. And as I started to refamiliarize myself with intuitive eating when the new edition came out in 2012, and I had been practicing meditation at that point for about 5 years, and I was in recovery myself for 5 years at that point, I started to see this like synergy that had to do with the existence of a basic intelligence, and also the lack of Dharma books, Buddhist related books, you know, that spoke about food and body stuff. I had actually heard a number of Buddhist teachers sort of reveal their blind spot about food and body stuff.
Doesn't that kill you? It kills
me.
Oh my God.
I remember sitting in like a level 1 training at Shambhala and hearing a teacher, a high level teacher, liken giving up sugar to a spiritual practice of renunciation. And I was like, here you are, here's a brand new, you know, meditation students who are now kind of making a parallel between a spiritual practice and giving up sugar, which is then going to affect their physiology in a negative way. And they're going to think that they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
You know? And so I really wrote the book because I saw the way that the diet culture was costing all of us collectively, you know, what it cost me as an individual, but also what I lose out on because so many other people are concerned about the ways in which they're inadequate. You know, and I was saying to my colleague, Alexis Conason, last week, or 2 weeks ago, I lost track of time. You know, what if all of these new women who were sworn into Congress were like busy worrying about the size of their thighs, and they didn't, like, you know, get involved and decide to run for office? We would have lost out collectively on that.
It's a huge distraction. The whole body dissatisfaction and the whole diet culture, fat phobia, weight stigma, all of that has got to go.
It is. And it's like a diversion tactic so that we don't come into our own. Because I just see the people around me as so powerful. And not when they become this, it's them as they are. Like, their basic, you know, inherent selves are powerful. And yet that gets sort of put aside because they're becoming, they're, you know, trying to be the best version of themselves, or they're making their bodies into projects. You know, this is all things that are very familiar to you. And then, you know, just viewing it through that Buddhist lens kind of gave it a framework of like, how does this become part of the spiritual practice?
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more, because I think that's what makes your book so different. There's a very big, beautiful spiritual element. Why don't you, you know, and actually I think for people who are watching this, I think some folks might have the idea they have to be Buddhist to appreciate it. So maybe you can address both the spirituality and why this book is actually great for anyone, regardless of their tradition.
Well, and I love your endorsement that you very generously gave. You don't have to be Buddhist to benefit from this book. And, you know, I think of meditation and Buddhism in general as a secular philosophy that's compatible with Christianity, atheism, Judaism. I mean, in New York, you know, there's lots of Boo Jews around, and, you know, Buddhist atheists, and I guess my approach to spirituality is really just how you live your life. So it doesn't have to do with a system of belief per se, but the intention that you bring. And I think, you know, the intention within Buddhist philosophy of just working with things as they are, and of staying with your experience and riding it as it is through the ups and downs, that's transformative. And that's actually compatible and complementary to any system of thought, I think.
Well, and actually, if I can just add to that, one of the things that just strikes me, you know, when I was reading your book, I was thinking, yeah, there's so many psychologists who identify as Buddhist psychologists, or you look at a lot of the third generation, the new wave of practices like DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, ACT, these things have been influenced by Buddhist psychology. So when your book came along, I'm thinking, oh, what a great idea, you know?
Well, and, you know, one of the biggest things that I'm still on a very steep learning curve about this, but the fact that everything is happening in the body, and intuitive eating focuses on interoceptive awareness, and just kind of learning and observing in myself and now in my clients for the last couple of years how meditation gives them access to what is constantly being communicated by their bodies. So, you know, I am someone who loves to exist in a disembodied head. You know, I learned very early on to like shut down whatever was below the neck. And so coming back to my body has been like a really interesting practice, and meditation has allowed me to do that with some sense of safety and stability. And I think, you know, the technique that I talk about in the book is an open eye technique. And I think that in particular, when it comes to the diet culture and taking this kind of counterculture approach while we still live in this diet culture, training with eyes open actually like helps us navigate this world and stay on this path.
And so when you're, just for clarity, when you're talking about eyes open, you're referring to a meditation technique?
The meditation technique that I talk about in the book is an eyes open practice, which is like a shocking thing to a lot of people. It was a shock to me the first time my teacher, Susan Piver, was like, we keep our eyes open in this practice. And I was like, what? Because I was like, surprise! I had this vision of myself as like this peaceful meditator with my eyes closed and my hands in some kind of special position. And then I learned we don't do any of that stuff, you know? And yet there's something about like the eyes being open, but not really focused on anything, that seems to create this extra layer of stability, I have found. What do you think?
Well, I have to, let's just fess up. You know that I meditate.
I do. I found out the day that we met in 2013 in Houston, when we figured out that we were like studying the same lineage of Buddhism, which was it's still a trip to me.
It was a trip to me too, because I remember we were just talking lightly, and I was like, "How do you know that word?" But actually, I love this idea that we exist in the world with our eyes wide open. And so if we're engaged in a meditation practice with our eyes wide open, to me, it gives us access to using that anytime that we need it. You know,
Right.
It's, I think, rather beautiful.
Yeah. It's like off the cushion practice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And even just the different ways in which we use food. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but even
That's
just
okay.
the different ways that we like kind of use food to go away from our experience. Training in meditation with our eyes open, again, helps us cultivate that ability to stay.